Brought to you by JMR Rentals, professional digital cinema and broadcast equipment rentals in Brooklyn, New York. JMRNY.com. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and joining me via Zoom today, she is the writer-director of the new film #Like, Miss Sarah Pirozek. Welcome, Sarah.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Hey, it's great to have you. I was interested. I saw that I didn't get to see the movie, but I did get to see your trailer, and it looked very intriguing. And I do want to talk about that, but first, I want to talk to, as I do with all my guests, I want to talk to you about you. So, how did you get into filmmaking? What is your origin story?
You know, film school, came to the States. Obviously, I talk funny, so you can tell I'm from another far land. And I went to film school at St. Martin's in London. And then when I was trying to get into the film business back then, it was really difficult for women to get in above any kind of level. There are a few plucky women who did get in, but I just thought, you know what, let me go to the States. I have an American passport, being half American. And, you know, it's more of a meritocracy there. I might be able to, if I work hard, you know, get on. And it actually turned out to be true. A lot of people were very kind and helpful to me. And I was very lucky also. Luck always, as you know, and anyone watching knows, luck has a lot to do with everything. But I had what's sort of interesting, a trivia thing, is that when I was a little girl, my mom had taken care of, I think, Robert Rosson's kids, who is the director who did Cool Hand Luke and Alexander the Great and a whole bunch of things. And we were in New York one summer when I was 9, maybe. And my mom took me to see Mrs. Rosson. And on her mantelpiece, she had an Oscar because her husband had passed away. So she got to keep the Oscar. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I love that. Can I hold it? I remember holding it and thinking, oh, I like this. I know what it was. But so I was very excited about that. And she said, well, if you work hard, you could do that, you know. And I just thought, what a nice lady. Anyway. And then, you know, I forgot all about it until I decided as a teenager, maybe I'd want to get into that. And then full circle, here I am waiting for my Oscar still, but making films.
I assume that they never saw the Oscar again. Somehow wound up in your shoulder bag.
Yeah, in my mom's Mary Poppins purse.
She's like, where did this come from? And then it's a sitcom. So you got this picture, #like. So I want you to do something very Hollywood for me and give me like the log line of the movie, and then kind of what inspired it.
You got it. No, I'm going to give you the log line, but what's really funny is I used to, you know how the screenwriting books always tell you to pitch your log line to everyone to see if they like it and see if it plays. And I was at a party for a friend's movie premiere, and Betty Gordon, and she was friends with the guy who's the showrunner of House of Cards. And Frank Puglisi, I think. Anyway, we have to check that. But I was chatting to this guy about my film and everything. I had no idea who he was. And I said, let me shoot you my log line. I'm going around the party telling everyone my log line before I write it. So I have my structure. And he helped me with one little part of it, just one sentence. But the log line is as follows. Okay. Rosie, Woodstock teen, is mourning the first anniversary of her younger sister Amelia's death when she discovers the man that sexploited and bullied her sister to commit suicide back online, trolling for new victims. After the authorities refuse to get involved, she finds a darker side she never knew she had as she takes justice into her own hands. Boom. So the bit that he added, which I think was really good, was she found a darker side she never knew she had. Because I pitched in the whole log line, which was kind of the story, not the character emotional drive. So he added the little motor in there, which I thought was very clever because log lines are an art form in themselves.
How did you come up with that? Was it inspired by, did you know anybody this happened to? Like, how did that come about?
Well, it started, first of all, I was just, you know how you 2 in the morning and you go down a hole and you used to start looking at stories and looking at things. And then I had just previously seen a fantastic documentary called Audrey and Daisy that I don't know if you have heard about or seen, but it's the story of two girls that were sexually assaulted. Um, One had killed herself and one had not, and the unfairness of it. I mean, there's a horror of all the abuse and everything, but what really struck me was the unfairness of it and that people weren't really taking it seriously. And the doc is great. And then, at night I'm researching things, going down holes, and I read a story about a young woman in Canada who had been sexploited. She had, very much like the backstory of my film, I kind of based it loosely on that she had been bullied, and the way that predators can sexploit kids, usually girls, boys too though, is they use their peers as a blackmail. So they say, I'm going to tell all the peers that you did this, or I'm going to send them a picture of you doing that. And kids didn't know, if you just got lifted her shirt to flash this guy, because he was sort of pushing her to do stuff for him on this talent website where she thought she would meet a person who would make her career. And then he took the picture, he screen grabbed it, which she didn't realize he could. And then he catfished all her friends in middle school, creating a profile, kind of like a Justin Bieberish looking 13-year-old boy. Said, I'm new in your school. And then he started bullying her and saying, I'm friends with all your friends. You need to send me more graphic pictures of yourself. And she said no. And, also not telling her mom at this point. And then he did send it to all her friends. And she got horribly bullied. And it was kind of like the Audrey and Daisy thing too, because that girl and her family got bullied out of their town because the boy that had raped her and sexually assaulted her friend was part of the football team. It's like just one of those classic cliches that's a cliche for a reason. And his dad had been a councilman or something. And I just thought, number one, this is horrible. Number two, this was just before the Me Too wave. So I was riled up. I'm a dyed in the wool feminist, and I was just riled up, and I just thought, if this happened to my daughter or some young woman I knew, I would be so enraged. But how can I help? How can I stop this? So I thought, pre-Me Too, also pre-women getting the opportunity to be making films, because there was a confidence gap about funding female films, even though I had done $1 million commercial campaign, which was 7 commercials, which added up less than 5 minutes. No one could see me funded. So I said, I'm going to make a very genre movie. I'm going to make it thriller horror. I'm going to make it about something I care about, because as you know, and everyone watching knows, as an indie filmmaker, you're with a film for years, not weeks, not months, but years, from inception through, I think I've been with this film 5 years now, and it's just coming out today. So I wanted to do something that maybe parents could watch and learn about what the internet's all about, or teens could watch. And it would be sort of like a Trojan horse, it would be more of a genre movie that teens might be having a slumber party, scrolling through Netflix and go, oh, let me watch this. And what's super creepy about it is that you don't know what's behind that screen and the internet. And there are lots of very creepy people pretending to be someone else out there. And it's not such a safe space.
I was just thinking while you were saying that, like, this is something I never had to worry about, or we never even thought about, when we were kids. And, the internet was kind of new when I was a kid. But we didn't have social media. There was no Facebook. And these are all recent developments. And they do have a lot of potential to be sinister. It's interesting that you kind of turn around and do something positive with it. So you have a couple of young actors. You have some young actors in this. Can you talk about kind of your relationship with them, and because you're dealing with sensitive subject matter?
It was complicated. The one thing I knew telling the story, that I didn't want to show any exploitation of the girls or the girl who killed herself in the story. And it was very tricky because I had to kind of show some gruesomeness. So there's a point where a lot of it plays on the actress's face. It's her response to it versus what's happening, which is classic noir classic horror, noir more than horror, thriller. Um, and there was one scene where you see a very slow load of a Facebook picture, and you see it on this young girl, and you realize, like, gets to about here and she's not wearing anything, and then you cut away. You have to do things like that protect the visuals of the kids. But really, all the actors in it were older than the age they played. They were above 18. So that was helpful, because at one point I was looking at, because the teens in the film are 16 and 18. The three girls are 16 and the boy is 18, who are the leads in it. And the casting, I did cast some younger kids, and I tried to cast them, and I just didn't feel that they could handle the material the right way. So I got these older people involved, and they were really behind the storytelling and really behind the theme of the piece. So that was great. And working with them, I think, they're really smart actors. I get a hard deal, I think, a lot of the time. People don't think that they're as intellectual as they are. I mean, they're all really smart people who really got what we were trying to do. And then, of course, you can't forget the lead, the real star of the show, who doesn't get talked about as much up front because he appears a little bit later in the film, is who we call the man. And that's the man that we assume is the predator. And that's Mark Menchaca, who was in Ozark and The Sinner and The Outsider, Stephen King's Outsider. And he was amazing because he had signed on to the film a year before we shot, and then we had to push it 8 months because of a casting snafu. And he really hung in there, but he loved the material. As soon as I'd sent him the script, he was just like, yeah, I'm down to do this. And it's a very sensitive role for him too, because he's a good guy, or is he a bad guy? And how does he play that and not give too much away? And his interaction with my lead actress, Sarah Rich, who's incredible, really made the film, and how they worked with each other was really moving and powerful. And, it was very potent, and it had, like, they both have very muscular acting chops. So it was really fun putting them together and seeing them work,
One of the things that's interesting too, from the guy's perspective, is I remember Ted Levine, the guy who played Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. And he did that movie, and it was a big hit movie, and won all sorts of Oscars. And then he was like typecast. Everybody was like, oh, we have a serial killer, call Levine. And he didn't work for years. I think he took like 5 years off or something like that. And if I were your lead, like, I would kind of feel the same way. Because you play this part, and it's like, well, do I want to get typecast as like sexual predator guy? From the girl's perspective too, like being that age, because it really, 18 is still young. I'm going to assume that they had stories about this sort of thing that had, happened to friends of theirs, or were they able to kind of draw upon that stuff?
Sure. No, sure. I mean, this is the thing too. I mean, most women walk around in a repressed state of rage all the time. And some men are smart enough to know that, and others not so smart. But yeah, I mean, I since the day I can remember being around adult men, I've been hit on and bothered. So every single girl has, in one way or another. And it's really funny because I talked to my husband about this a lot when I was writing it, and he was like, no, it doesn't seem right. And I was like, see, the thing is, nice men don't know what goes on, because nice men aren't doing it, and they think their friends are just as nice as they are, their friends and family. And every now and then you get a guy who goes, I don't trust him around my daughter, or I don't know, it's because they know, they know who they are or what they're capable of. But yeah, I don't think we had to go very far. We didn't have to travel very far down the road to find the girls in the piece understanding it, or even any woman watching it. It's really interesting that the critical reviews I'm getting are fantastic, but very few men are loving it. Mainly young men are not loving the film so much. Women are loving it, and men of a certain age who are grown-ups actually are really loving it. So it's really interesting, the response. And also the typecasting thing is interesting. Mark Menchaca is often odd, creepy guy. in his roles. But he was on Inside Amy Schumer. He did an amazing comedy run at that, which was hysterical. And he was also in a cowboy movie that he wrote, not cowboy, but like, Southern movie that he wrote and produced, which is great. But yeah, he is like the character he played. Have you seen The Outsider, the Stephen King show? Oh my. He plays Jack, who gets possessed by the devil, kind of. I don't want to do too much spoiler on it, but he's incredible in it. It's really, really incredible. It has a vibe like, what was that show with Matthew McConaughey and True Detective? It has a True Detective kind of noir-y, horror-y vibe about it. He's amazing in that.
Everybody's going to view these types of films differently. For me, it's like a character study. I don't have kids that age, and it's been a long time since I've been that age. So for me, it would be like watching a different world. Like it's not part of my immediate reality. For some people, I can also understand. I have been the guy who's stumbled across some like Lifetime movie, and it's always like every guy in the movie is like a horrible, abusive husband or a rapist or something like that, and the only good guy is like the gay best friend. And you watch that stuff and you're just like, oh man, like it's in a way it's unfair. I know that it's not, because like I've never been a woman, but I have walked with women, and I used to work with a bunch of women, and I've heard a lot of stories. And I've also seen the looks and everything that they get when they walk down the street. And it's interesting to sort of be on the other side of that. And usually, in the male in that situation, you're the one sort of putting yourself between, the woman and the would-be whoever. And I'm sure there's a whole psychology as to why certain men do that. But the online thing is even worse in a way, I think, because you have the power of anonymity, and the ability to be somebody else and to make people think you're a nice young guy or something like that. And the other thing is that, like, I don't know if you address this in the film, but many of the laws have not caught up with this yet.
Yes, I don't address it in the film, but when I've done Q&As after the film at different film festivals, I've talked about that. I mean, I looked it up. Only, I think, 5 states when I was writing the script had sexploitation as a felony. That's 5 states. And then, and general like bullying exploitation online, it's the laws need to catch up. The guy actually who was bullying the girl in my backstory, Amanda, they tried to track her. She was in Canada. They tried to get I think the New York or Buffalo state somehow were involved, because I think her mother had moved to Buffalo briefly. So they had the IP addresses. They searched it all out, and they didn't have the laws for disclosure or the ability even to do it. And they then heard about a young woman in, I think it was Norway, who this had happened to. So they got the Norwegian police involved, and they were more able to coalesce with the other law enforcement agencies to try and track this guy. And they found the guy. He's in jail now, I think, because he was living in Holland in the Netherlands, but he'd been doing this for like over 10 years, and he had 75 victims.
I think that's interesting in and of itself, and it's an interesting subject matter.
I mean, that could have been the whole film.
Right. That could have just that one guy. It could have been, but so do you think, because this is your first feature that you've done, do you think for like the movie says something, but you said you kind of wrap it in a genre? It's almost like putting the dog's pill in a hot dog before you feed them, because I feel that way too. I do not want to see a documentary about this stuff. I mean, if it's on and it's good, I'll watch it, but for me, it's not that entertaining, and it usually makes you feel gross afterward, But like, do you feel like that was kind of the way, the key to it is like saying, let me take this bitter pill and wrap it in a hot dog for people, And was that a lesson that you had to learn? Did you originally imagine doing it like straighter?
I always thought, like, I- I have to own, there are a couple of preachy moments in the film that if I'd had the wherewithal, mentally and emotionally to go, okay, I don't need this. The film does the work for this. They're just two little scenes. I'm like, ugh, Sarah, stop banging the nail on the head. But people either live through it or don't. But on the whole, I really don't like proselytizing. I don't like people who proselytize and put, they're boring, right? You don't want to sit there with someone banging on at you about something. You want someone to tell you a funny joke and you go, oh, that's what they were saying, or a funny story, or a sad story, or a complicated story, because this film is actually, there are many twists and turns in it, and it doesn't turn out exactly as you might imagine it would, with all the outcomes that kind of get lined up, like the Lifetime movies. It's not a Lifetime movie for sure.
I think that's key. I think if you want to make a good movie, first of all, make a good movie. If you can get a message in there, I can't remember which director said it. It was probably like, John Ford or somebody said if you want to send a message, use Western Union. But I do feel like that's important, and you can kind of gauge what's preachy, what's not. I had this conversation. We were reviewing the Spike Lee film, The Five Bloods, and there are parts of that movie that they just basically talk to the camera and tell you about history, and you're like, why do I need to know this? But maybe the time of subtlety is not now. Maybe a subtext is not a thing that people get, and maybe you do need to get out the sledgehammer every once in a while and whack people with it. Anyway, so I think that was important what you said though too about kind of having misgivings about those scenes. Was there anything else that you kind of learned from this experience, and would you impart any advice to any other first-time feature makers?
Oh gosh, I could write a book, and I probably should. I just wrote 2 articles for Filmmaker magazine just about my distribution journey, like at the beginning and towards the end now to where I've got to, because we finally got it on Apple TV. But there's so many lessons. Take time. Time is really valuable to develop your script and to develop your production process. And what I mean by develop is think about your team players, think about who's there, why they're there, think about trying to raise money, think about saving money for your end stuff. I had no money saved for any publicity or finishing or, and of course I did the Kickstarter at the end, just to get some money in for the post-production. But I would say almost think about it, not, you have to have so many hats as a filmmaker because it's a film industry, it's not the film art. If you're an artist, you can make your film and you can watch it. But if you want other people to watch it, you have to think about it as a business a little bit. So, if you're knitting babies' hats and you're putting them up on Etsy, you're thinking about how much does it cost to make the hat? Who wants the hat? How do I make the hat appealing to a multiple amount of people? Blah, 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 blah. So that's one of the reasons I like this story, and I knew I wanted to do a genre, but I knew I couldn't do a horror. So really own and stick into your genre, what it is. If it's going to be a rom-com, make it a rom-com. If it's going to be, mine straddles, I think, a little too much between drama and thriller. I think it maybe should have gone harder thriller, but it is a thriller. But the one thing I knew I didn't want to do was horror, because I don't want to have anyone seeing blood, guts, gore, skin being pierced, knives, anything like that. But there is a bit of torture in it, but it's more psychological, where our girl is pretty awful to our guy. But I guess advice, get money if you can. Try not to put your money into it. There are the streaming wars right now are real. Netflix 5 years ago was buying finished indies, just literally buying them for money, maybe 100 grand, maybe 300 grand, maybe 500 grand. now you can't even get a minimum guarantee from distributors. Like no MGs are going out, or if they are, they're tiny. And if you get an MG, you're never going to see any more money. This is not the gravy train that many years ago, like what was that horror thing they did in the woods, black and white? Blair Witch. It's not Blair Witch Days. It's not even, I'm trying to think of a more recent money making thing. Anyway, but get a name in it. See if you can get a name, you know, like Mark Menchaca is my lead. He's amazing. And you know his face as soon as you see him. He played Russ Langmore in Ozark. Incredible guy, real recognition, but he doesn't have a name. If you hear his name, you don't go, who's that? You know, whereas if you get, you know, it's, and then say, get someone is really hard. I got him through a friend of a friend. But if you're going to pay a casting agent, it's between 5 and 10 grand just to cast your movie. That's just at the beginning. I mean, it's just money, 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 money. So the advice I would give is develop your whole idea, like get a very solid script. Don't think about improving. Don't think about, you know, you need a solid product that you can put out into the world just to get people attached to it. A good DP, a good editor, good stars.
No, that's great advice. And we talk about that all the time on this show about, you know, those little things that people don't think of. And people do get impatient and they want to rush to the finish line, and everybody wants to get shooting, but pre-production should be the longest phase of development. But anyway, that's all great stuff. I'm going to wrap up, but for people who want to know more about you and about the film, where can they find you on the web?
Well, you can go to Facebook and you go to like the feature film. You can follow me on Instagram at Pixie Hale, Pixiehale. And the film is on Apple TV, on Amazon Prime, and I'll post about it on social, so you'll see more where it travels to.
All right, thanks so much. And, you know, when you have your next project, you'll come back and talk about that.
See you in 5 years.
And that's all we got for you today. Thanks so much for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more of our content, including our movie reviews, visit our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Sarah Pirozek, and our sponsor, JMR Rentals. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.